Don't you just love the Christmas season?
Yep.
It's that time of year when we all just kind of breathe the collective sigh. We've made it through the year pretty much. And it's time just to let go and move into that space of love that seems to be birthing anew every day. So today I'm going to talk about preparing the soil. And we're going to talk about all that had been prepared for the coming of Jesus the Christ, the coming of the Christ to humankind. And step by step, man's sense of divinity has continued to grow. And it grew from his awareness of the divinity in nature to a God transcendent who we gave all the qualities and attributes of man to. And then to God within man, to God in the Christ, God in Jesus the Christ. And the evolution in consciousness, this is the path that we're on. We are unfolding to become aware and to know who we truly are. God's sons have come to mankind, have come to this planet throughout the ages. And they've revealed a higher vision, a higher understanding of God's plan for planet Earth. And to the best of their ability, they gave that revelation for the age that they were in. Man's evolution in spiritual consciousness has been continual. It's a continuum that if we begin to look at and to understand, we can see our rightful place in that continuum. We understand that each step along the way in man's evolution in consciousness is just that. It's a step. It's not the end. Each step leads to the next, and the next, and the next. And these steps were in preparation for the birth of the Christ. They were steps for all mankind. We all know the story of Jesus. We've heard it since we were kids, and we've seen the television shows, and we've participated in Christmas pageants and things like that. But there was quite a lot of support in Jesus' life. And we don't really look at it as much or as close as we could. We have to study it. And we have to dig a little bit deeper to understand all the support. And those first ages of man was supporting God. For all those teachers and people that were questing to understand God and to know God better, were preparing the steps that we could take to continue to grow in our spiritual evolution. And so it led up to that birth of the Christ for humanity. And so we look at the players in the life of Jesus the Christ. And so we can look at his parents, Mary and Joseph. Mary was born into a very devout Jewish family. They were very successful. And when Mary was born into that family, her dad gave a celebration for her birth. And he didn't invite all his friends or the high society in which they were. He invited all the people. He invited a lot of the downtrodden people, the poor people, and invited them to come to his house to participate in this feast for the joy and the blessing that he'd received from God, because he knew that if he didn't give forth his blessings to all mankind, they'd probably be taken away from him. So this was a pretty good demonstration of that male action, supporting God. And then Mary, when she was born at a very young age, her parents took her to the temple, and she was blessed and everything. And then she got to do some studies with Hillel, the chief rabbi of the temple. And Joseph was an Essene, and that was a sect of people who were expecting the return of the Messiah on the planet. They lived a very pious, devout, spiritual life, pretty much away from the Jewish society. And their understanding, and they were waiting for and preparing for the birth of the Christ. And Joseph wasn't a scene. And then the story gets bigger when we've got Elizabeth and Zacharias. And then Gabriel comes to Elizabeth and tells her that she's going to... He comes to Zachariah first. And you're going to be a dad. And they're like old, 70s and that. And he can't believe it. And he tells them all this. And he's kind of like telling the angel what's up. So he loses his voice. He's unable to speak. He tells Elizabeth, and she's happy when they communicate and everything. Gabriel comes to Mary also and tells her that she's going to have a baby. You know, and he's going to be the Messiah. His name's going to be Jesus. You know, she accepts it. Elizabeth accepts it. Joseph accepts it. Because he's part of this consciousness that's open and receptive to the birth of the Christ on the planet. So we've got the stage set, and so then they've got to go to Bethlehem. Oh, little town of Bethlehem. So they're going to Bethlehem, and Mary's big with baby. And so there's no room in Bethlehem for them. So they find a cave, you know, which is a stable. And within that stable, you know, they're supported within that cave, within that stable, because within that stable are like consciousness of life. There's the mineral, the rocks of the earth are supporting the birth of the Christ. Plants, there's hay and straw and the timbers that are in there. The plant kingdom. The animal kingdom, there's oxen and sheep. And that's even a little more interesting because we're talking about support and support throughout the ages, and that oxen represents the bull of the age of Taurus, and the sheep represents the rams of the age of Aries, and these were preceding the Piscean age when Jesus was born into. So he's supported by these past consciousness and love for God. And then, of course, his parents, he's supported by Mary and Joseph, two people loving God, loving one another, and loving this whole experience that they're having. And then they're welcomed by the angels. So we've had the mineral kingdom, the plant kingdom, the animal, the human, and spiritual kingdom. This is all supporting the birth of the Christ. And while they're in the cave, you know, they're visited by the three wise men. You've heard of those guys. And they're magi from Persia. And these are all initiates who studied the cosmos, who studied the stars and everything, and they know how to read these signs, and they know what's happening. And so they follow that Christmas star, and they come to the Christ, to honor the Christ. And then the shepherds that are in the fields tending their flocks at night, they were looking for a strong new leader to come to the planet, and they were humble, just salt of the earth people. So they were open and ready, receptive. And so then the angels come to them. The angels tell them that one has been born. And so they come down to the little cave too to honor the Christ. There's all this support on all sorts of levels that's been part of this continuum in our evolution and consciousness to this culmination right now, the birth of the Christ into humanity. It's a wonderful time, and peace on earth, goodwill to men. So, and then, of course, we know the story that Herod's looking for any new young child that's been born because he's afraid of this new king. The three wise men, when they came into town, they didn't know exactly where they're going or what they were looking for. And so Herod, they talk with Herod, and he's going, yeah, you find him and come back and tell me. But they were aware enough to read his energy, read his mind. And so they knew his plan. So when they talked with Mary and Joseph, they told him that plan. And so that's why go to Egypt. Go to Egypt. And so that's why Mary and Jesus and then Elizabeth and John went to Egypt to escape. And then when they were in Egypt, the place had been prepared. There were two master teachers, Elihu and Salome. And these were master teachers that taught Mary and Elizabeth, because they were the ones that were going to raise John the Harbinger, Jesus the Christ. So they stayed and learned from these master teachers so that they could teach their children the higher laws to support them in their missions. They're being supported all the way around. And then when it came time to head back home, they went on their way back. And then John the Harbinger, he's taught by a hermit, a master teacher, and an initiate Matheno. And so he lives with him and learns all about the Egyptian mysteries and how to live in oneness and harmony with all of life. And Jesus comes back to Nazareth with his parents, and he lives with them. And then, of course, we know that at 12 years old he goes to the temple. He goes to the temple before that time, and he gets to study with Hillel. That's a pretty good complete circle, isn't it? So he gets to study with Hillel. He teaches in the temple. That's where he gets lost from his parents. And then he says, would I not be about my Father's business? And he's in the Jewish temple at this time with all these elders, and they're listening to him. They're not kicking him out. He's being supported. He's being supported by that old consciousness. Whether they were aware of what was happening or not, he was allowed to express who he was. He begins his travels at a very young age. When he was 13, that's when he began his travels, and he went to India and Persia and China and Tibet, Assyria, Greece, Egypt. And when he went to all these countries, he studied with the Hierophants, the master teachers in these countries that had been teaching doctrine and dogma for thousands of years. But these Hierophants were open, and they were aware, and they could see Jesus the Christ. They could see that love made manifest, even though he was a boy. And they would welcome him in and begin to teach, and then Jesus would teach him. When he's teaching these master teachers, he says, the truth of one age is myth in the next. Its reality is untouched. It just needs to be reinterpreted in the present. And these countries, these sages, had become aware of how their teachings weren't serving their people any longer. And one example of this, there's many of them, but one of them, a teaching when he was in India, and he confronted them about the caste system, the different levels of people. And what Jesus showed and taught was the individual is important. The individual is important. We're losing something in our translation here. It's okay to grow and evolve in consciousness, and through reincarnation come back and have little different experiences. But all experiences are God. All experiences are good. And they had lost that. The people were untouchable. And he said, my Father would not give a law like that. He was reinterpreting it for the new time, you see. Yeah, it's good to get an understanding of reincarnation, expansion of consciousness, but it's changed a little bit now. Let's take it up to another level of love. So he reinterpreted that.